All right. So, in terms of a recap, before I open it out to all of us to hear from each other, I thought I'll play that video I played on the first day as a short summary, and I'll stop this time at chapter 2. So, let me know if you can hear it. It was a very short clipping of the Jonah story, so I hope you enjoyed. And like I said, Ella is here because it's the Sunday school version of it.
Yeah.
So she's waiting to watch. No.
Heroes of the Bible, Jonah.
Can you hear it?
This is Jonah. Jonah was a prophet. That means it was his job to tell people what God told him to say.
Yep.
One day, God told Jonah to go to Nineveh because the people of Nineveh were doing bad things. But instead, Jonah ran away.
Where are you, please?
And went to the port to board a ship, going the other way. He was hoping to get away from God. He sailed for a place called Tarshish. While he was at sea, God sent a great and powerful wind over the sea that caused a storm that seemed like it would break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the sailors tried everything they could think of to save the ship. Meanwhile, Jonah was sound asleep, so the captain went down and said, "How can you sleep at a time like this? Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will help us." Then the crew figured out that Jonah was the reason for the storm. And they asked him, "Who are you? Why is this happening to us?" Jonah told them who he was and that he worshiped the one true God who made the sea. Then he told the sailors to throw him in the sea so the storm would stop.
No, why?
The sailors still tried to escape the storm, but it was no use. So they asked God for forgiveness and threw Jonah into the sea. The storm stopped at once.
Whoa!
The sailors were amazed at God's power and they vowed to serve him. Now God sent a great fish to swallow Jonah.
Great.
And Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and nights. Jonah prayed to God from inside the fish, and God ordered the fish to spit Jonah out.
Yuck.
God told Jonah again to go.
So the last bit of that video is what we're going to look at today, that Jonah prayed from inside the belly of the great fish. It doesn't say whale. No, of course, we all sing songs about a great whale because we think of a great fish in terms of a whale. Anything that any of you would like to highlight that you remember now from say chapter 1 before we get on to chapter 2 today? We had some very interesting discussions last week, I must say.
Yes. I missed it.
Yes, we missed having you, Auntie Prema. Yeah. We started off in one direction and by the end of it, we had all reached another end of the direction.
Yeah. Perspective changed.
Yeah, it changed a bit for most of us, yeah. Yeah, so in terms of highlights, we said from chapter 1, so when we looked even as a parallel in chapter 4, to help us understand chapter 1, what was the main reason Jonah ran away from, in the opposite direction so far? This is going to be a quiz time now.
because the people of Nineveh were Israel's enemies.
Yes.
Long-time enemies.
Yes.
And when God told him to go there and preach, he thought that I don't want to preach to my enemies.
Yes.
And what if God saves them?
Yeah.
I mean, what if they repent and God saves them? So I'm not going to go. I'm going to go in another direction.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Gladys. Yeah, so we see that his main purpose was so that he wouldn't have to go to Nineveh. And last time, most of our discussions revolved around the many chances Jonah had to actually repent and turn back to Yahweh. And like during the storm, when the sailor, the captain goes to him and asks him to pray, he refuses. Meaning he doesn't, repent and turn back to God. And even at the end of it, when they try to, like the sailors are putting in the effort to try and save themselves and Jonah. Even then, Jonah is not at a point of turning back to God. He's still waiting for either the storm to stop or for him to be thrown overboard. And of course, we see that the storm calms down once Jonah is thrown overboard. And in a way, it also, we also spoke about how he was at that point, he was not looking for some miraculous, saving or, God rescuing him at that point. And that's what we're going to look at today. Because here suddenly we see that now Jonah is going to turn back to Yahweh. So if you have your Bibles with you, just turn to Jonah chapter 1. We'll start with the last verse. Let me exit this one. There are too many things going on here. Yeah. Yeah, you're able to see the verses. I have verse 2, chapter 2 here. But just, can one of you read chapter 1, the last verse?
And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights.
Yeah. Thank you, Deepaka. So just on this verse, a lot of debate has ensued. Do you know why we had such a lot of complications because of this one verse?
Because it seemed inconceivable and impossible for any fish to swallow a human being and the human being to remain alive inside that fish for 3 days and 3 nights.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, according to a human perspective, it was impossible.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe that is why Jonah was swallowed by the whale is the perception of people, because that's a huge fish. It's possible because whales have swallowed people.
Yes.
There are a lot of stories about somebody who was swallowed. And I know when I was teaching, there was a story in that Gulmohar reader.
Yeah.
And who was swallowed by the fish, by the whale, and he survived.
Yeah. Yeah. So this great fish is the one that's the most problematic for most people. Let's say one side of them will say it's impossible for someone to survive. There are also people who say that, a whale has a narrow throat, so it can't swallow a person. But we have also had evidence in terms of people who have survived, being swallowed by great, of course, in our times, we know that it's a whale. But technically, the Bible doesn't say it's a whale. But whatever kind of fish it was a fish that swallowed Jonah whole. It wasn't that a fish that bit him up to pieces, or that he was literally went through the shredder in that sense. But he was consumed whole, and he comes out whole as well. But also at this point, we have to remember that it's not like our Sunday school stories. Jonah was like with the video that I showed you. It's always Jonah sleeping in one nice dry patch in the belly of the great fish, and he's resting and he's sitting and praying and all. It wouldn't have been like that. It's not like, so have you seen pictures of this Jonah narrative where Jonah is sitting and burning he set up a fire and he's making food for himself and all? Some of us have seen it. Okay, meaning it's very creative and imaginative, to show how Jonah survived for 3 days. But I'd like to remind us that at this point, he possibly was we say in a coma, like a comatose state. We speak about, have you heard of people being in a coma and come out of a coma, many say weeks or even months later? They're not responsive, right?
Even after years.
Yeah. So it's possible that Jonah, and of course, they say I think the hearing is the last to go, but the mind is still alert, they say, in a coma. They can hear us, and a person in a deep coma, even though they're not responsive in that sense, they can still hear people. And so it's possible that Jonah's prayer itself was in that state of being in a comatose state. And that's what I'd like to remind us, that even at his, like as his life was ebbing away from him, it says in the verses that we're going to look at. So it's not like Jonah sitting and having one major party and, he's got a fire going. It's not like a barbecue party, like a bonfire in the tummy, and he's singing and he's praying. But it's going to be a phase of being comatose, but in that he's still not letting go of Yahweh. And that is something that comes up in the prayer as well. And now we'll move to chapter 2. So one of the things that discussions that come up about Jonah 2 is because of this plausibility of it. Is it actually plausible? So some people say, like in academic circles, there are a lot of people who will say, no, this is just a narrative. It's like a fictional story. But the way Jesus refers to Jonah in the New Testament.
Matthew.
Yeah. We looked at these references as well last time. Jesus refers to him as someone who existed. Jesus does not think of Jonah as someone who was fictional, or this narrative as being, a story, a story with a bigger moral or things like that. So when we see Jesus' response to Jonah himself, he says someone greater than Jonah is here and things like that. He actually refers to him as an actual person, like a historical person. So that adds to our, those of us who say, it was something that actually happened. And of course, now we have evidence saying that people can be swallowed by a whale and continue to survive like many days after that. Yeah, so in a way, it is a history. Like I learned also from the extra biblical resources that we have. We spoke about the time period, the dates that we have for when Jonah was. That also adds credibility to him being a historical person in that sense. So just hold all of that in balance, and then we'll move now into our chapter.
Also about the credibility of things. It's like this last verse. The Lord has prepared a great fish.
Yes.
And we also have in chapter 2, verse 10. So the Lord spoke to the fish and vomited. So this was part of God's plan.
Yes.
So it is all things are possible with God.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And also, I was going to highlight this at the end of chapter 2. But also, if you take the end of chapter 1 and chapter 2 in parallel, you see that a lot of chapter 1, you remember we were talking about Lord of creation. Last week also we had this discussion, God of heaven, God who created the heavens and God who created the earth. And we also discussed about how in the New Testament, when Jesus himself calms the storm, it pointed to his divinity, I said, no? That he was God who controls creation. And also chapter 1 and chapter 2 end with creation obeying the creator.
Yeah.
When unlike Jonah, if you see, ironically, creation seems to be obeying its creator. And we humans seem to be in opposition with the creator. The great whale, whenever the Lord said, go swallow that guy, that great whale went and did what was required. Its job, literally. And when God said, okay, no, you can't have him for dinner. You can't keep him in, and you have to get him out. Marination must have been in process, but he was not going to be settled there forever. So he was. So when the Lord told that great fish to throw him out on the land again. So, and also you'll have to notice the direction in which the fish has gone. It's gotten him to a place. It didn't throw him out back into the sea as soon as it said, when God told the great fish to throw him out, it actually went closer to the land and threw him out. So things like that in terms of how creation itself is submissive to the creator, and how we humans are the opposite of it sometimes. Do the opposite of what we're called to do in that sense. Yeah. So welcome to our time together for today, and we continue now with Jonah chapter 2 verses 1 to 10. It's our 4th session together. Yeah, so in terms of review, I won't go too much into detail about his name meaning dove and the references in 2 Kings 14:25 and things like that. We've done this, we've gone over this in detail over the past couple of weeks. Yeah, so he was from the north, and we said that 2 kings that were highlighted were King Jehu and King Ahab, and Israel was a vassal to the Assyrians, which meant they paid tribute. And then I also explained the idea of a covenant or a treaty between the greater kingdom and the lesser kingdom. So the lesser kingdom in this case was Israel, because they were the ones paying tribute to the greater kingdom. And the same rules of this greater party and lesser party is what comes into play for the covenant as well. And these were the pictures from the extra biblical resources that we have. Yeah, so you have Ahab and King Jehu, who is bowing down to pay tribute. Yeah. And so we looked at this. Jonah was called to Nineveh, and Tarshish was the farthest geographical point. And it took literally almost 3 years to do like one trip. Yeah, so today our setting is going to be here. Jonah and this whale actually going to put him out on the land. Yeah, so this is a very tentative kind of a map. It doesn't tell us exactly where. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly the point of location where Jonah got back onto dry land, but from wherever he was, he goes back in the right direction. That would be our next session, where Jonah actually goes to Nineveh. And we saw that he sleeps while a storm rages, and he's discovered by lots. And the final thing was that he's cast overboard. And at this point, we also said that Jonah was stubborn enough for, that he was he did not want to let go of what he was holding on to, and he was willing to die for whatever he was holding on to. So these were some of the takeaways that we had from last week. A prophet who runs away from God and goes down, both physically and spiritually, and he pays a high price. And both he and Jesus sleep at the bottom of the boat. But we see that even though he's running away from God, he still gives credit to God as the creator, and ends up God still uses that situation to bring people to himself, where the sailors turn to Yahweh and take oaths, like we said. Yeah. And Jesus refers to Jonah in Matthew 12, and also Jesus in the storm in Mark 4, and the idea of how both of them were sleeping. And also that Jesus is creator God who has power over the elements in that sense. Yeah, so looking at Jonah's prayer now, can you all turn to Jonah chapter 2? We'll look at the prayer, Jonah's prayer itself. Yeah, can one of you read verses 1 and 2 together? You can read from the NIV one. I have 2 versions up for us.
From the inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of dead called for help, and you listened to my cry."
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know who this is. Can I please rename you? Deepika, do you know?
Christine, yeah.
Christy, Auntie Lucy. I thought it sounded like you. I said, let me check. Yeah. Hi, Auntie Christine. Nice to have you join us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're looking at this. So basically now it says, from inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. So even here, the thing to remember is that he has not let go of his God. He's still holding on to Yahweh and the God that he is a prophet for. Like you see, even though he's running away, he is not letting go of, like we say, literally he was a prophet, right? Yeah. That was his job description. He's not quitting his job. Do you see?
Mm.
Yeah. And like we said, for people like, say, especially, say, someone like Jonah, it becomes like there is no separation between, say, work and worship, because they are in what we call full-time ministry in that sense. Now, of course, like in our times, we have this dichotomy between sacred and secular. But at the end of the day, all that is given to us is from God. So whether you're at a secular job or like we say, like a full-time job, we all work for the Lord, as unto the Lord, no? So that idea, of course, there are some people that still tend to separate, but I'd like to think that it's the same. It doesn't matter whether you're in a secular job and then serving God separately in the church, because both you're doing as unto the Lord only. But and also similarly in Jonah's case, it was the same thing for him. His work and worship were one. So even though he wanted to literally quit his job, he could not let go of his worship. You remember, he's running away from his job. His job was to go to Nineveh and to preach. So literally he couldn't give his resignation. So he said, let me go in the opposite direction like that. Yeah, because he did. And of course, he was willing to pay with his life, like we said in the previous chapter. But at this point, we see that Jonah is still not letting go of the God that he worships because of the relationship that he has with this God. Like, of course, we say God was his employer because he was a prophet. But the idea is that irrespective of whether he was a prophet or not, he was an Israelite and he was a Jew. And his God was something that he was not willing to let go of. Yeah, so we see that he prays to his God, even though he knows that, like, I don't know if some of us are like Jonah. Like sometimes we get very angry with God. But I don't know if we are as committed to God as Jonah is at this point. Because a lot of people that I know have gone, say, no, I don't want religion. I don't even want Christ and that relationship. A lot of people now, especially if you see atheists or people who call themselves unchurched or, I don't want to be a part of church and religion anymore. They throw, like they say, the baby out with the bathwater. The whole point of Christianity is that relationship, right? Yeah. But sometimes because people cannot manage, say, tradition, religion, and the boundaries that come with it, they also give up on that relationship that they have with Christ, or that they don't want to invest in that relationship or pursue that relationship. But we see that Jonah is exemplary in that because he's still not letting go of that relationship that he has with Yahweh. Because the verse tells us very clearly that he prayed to Yahweh, his God. Yeah, it says from inside the fish, like I said, from that comatose state, he prayed to Yahweh, his God. And then he's praying and he says, in my distress, I called to Yahweh and he answered me. From the deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help and you listened to my cry. So if you look at this second verse, it works like a summary of his prayer. Okay, so if you see what Jonah is saying now is, this is what I did. I called to the Lord in my distress and he answered. And he's also giving you details of where he was. And that the Lord heard his cry. And the rest of the chapter can be understood as the details of the prayer, what he said. Yeah, and
he was sure that even though he had not done what God wanted him to do, when he was in distress, he knew that he had that freedom to call to God to help him and pull him out of this difficulty.
Yes.
Though he had not done his part, but he was assured of God's help, come what may.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Based on that, like I said, Andy, same thing that I said, because of he was not letting go of the relationship that he had with Yahweh, he continued to hold on to that and he called out to him. So if you all are making notes, you all can break up this chapter itself as the verses 3 to 7 as the cry for help and the subsequent rescue. Yeah, so verses 3 to 7a will be the nature or the extent of the trouble. What was the problem that Jonah got into? Verses 3 to 7a, one half of verse 7. And there's a little overlap. And the cry for help and the rescue that Yahweh sends as verses 6 to 7. Yeah, and then the last two verses are the promise to give thanks, where he says, I will go back to the temple and things like that, as the promise to go back and return or make good on his promise. Yeah, and it's basically if you want to break up the structure of the prayer itself, but that's additional, like I said. So you've got this verse 3 now, where he explains the nature of the trouble, 3 to 6 or 3 to 7a, like that. Yeah, so we've got, he says, you hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me, and all your waves and breakers swept over me. How do we understand this verse?
What is the meaning of Sheol?
We'll come to that, Auntie. We'll come to Sheol in a bit. But I wanted to ask us about what Jonah thought about this. He says, you threw me into the deep waters. Could you read the version that you have?
Me?
Yeah, Sheol comes later, no?
No, it comes under verse 2.
In your verse? Okay, go ahead and
verse
read it.
2, verse 2. And he said, I cried out to the Lord because of my affliction, and he answered me. out of the belly of Sheol I cried,
cried for
and
help.
you heard my voice.
Yeah.
For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me.
Yeah. So if you look
All
at the
your
translation,
billows, your waves passed
and
over me.
that's okay. For now, just two. So if you see the two versions that I have as well, one has Sheol, your question, and one of them refers to as a realm of the dead.
Wow.
So basically, Sheol was understood as a place of the realm of the dead, like the Neverland, like the underworld, we say, no, the Neverworld, like that. Where, like if you have all these, what do they say? Horror movies. The undead. Yeah, it's basically the Neverland. It was where one goes when one dies, literally to the point of death. Yeah. Okay, so he's saying here that he went all the way down into the, and it says, from the deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help. And also, this is a reminder again for us about Psalm 139. Of where can I go from God? To run away from God. Is there any place that you and I can run away from God? Yeah. If you look at Psalm 139, no? It says, where can I go from your presence? Where can I flee from your spirit? It says, if I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I, go to the far end of the sea, you are there. Yeah.
In fact, all of Jonah's prayer is a lot of verses from the Psalms.
Yeah. And especially 139 at this point. All the things that he's saying are actually are reminders for us from the Psalms that you can't actually run away from the presence of God. And like I said earlier, he was a prophet. He knew that he couldn't run away from the presence of God. So in a way, he's trying the impossible. So in a way, when he made that trip itself, he knew what he was doing. Because he knew he couldn't, which is why even, like, remember, it doesn't say that God told Jonah that this is what you must do. For me to stop the storm, you have to be thrown into the sea. Jonah knew that it was going to be death. He had to be, he would have been paying with his life for what he was doing. Not only was he paying a high price to get on that ship, but he knew that it would end up with, death would have been a price that he was willing to pay. He's willing to pay with his life, like they say.
He preferred death to going and preaching to Nineveh.
Yeah. That's what we were talking about last week as well. Yeah. So, and also you see, yes, Gladys.
In Psalm 88, David says, you have put me in the depths of the pit. In regions dark and deep. So I think Jonah quotes that.
Yes. Yeah. So the idea is to be like at the point of death. Like life is ebbing away from him, like that. Yeah, and also to remember here that even in like we said, in his comatose state, he knows who put him there, but he's not letting go of the God who put him there. Like he's in this distressful situation. He says, you hurled me into the depths. He doesn't say, because I didn't do, I got myself into this trouble. He still knows who's in control of his life, like that. Like we say, God is in control of everything that comes our way. Yeah. So we see that Jonah gives, he is fully aware that God is the one. He says, you put me into the depths. And also in chapter 1, we saw that God was the one that brought about the storm as well. So sometimes when we look at troubles in our life, sometimes we're wondering, how can God allow it? Yeah, but sometimes we see, like in Jonah's case, it may be even God himself who is put us in a situation where we will turn back to him. If we've gone off in the opposite direction or we're doing what we're not supposed to be doing in that sense. Sometimes there are times when God himself will put us into the depths, because Jonah also recognizes that God was the one that hurled him into the depths, into the very hearts of the seas. And of course, this winds and currents, now we have great, like they say, Nat Geo and BBC footage of how life is underwater. So literally Jonah is seeing, or has seen this when he got into the water. He sees the current swirling around him, and he sees the waves and the breakers, on the surface of the water and things like that. And of course, he says now in verse 4 that I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your temple. Yeah, so you remember we spoke about this in chapter 1, saying that possibly when the word of the Lord came to Jonah in chapter 1, he was possibly in the temple. serving as a prophet and not necessarily in northern Israel. So when he left also and went down, like we said, to Joppa, he knew that he was going away from the presence of the Lord in that sense. Yeah, and he says, now he's talking to himself. He's saying, I said to myself, basically, or his another translation will say, I thought, or, I thought to myself, I have been banished from your sight, and I would never again see your holy temple. Remember the temple in Jerusalem. So physically, he was thinking, okay, when I go from here, this is the end. I'm never returning. And then we talk about, he talks about the waters engulfing him up to his neck, or, it says the deep ocean surrounded me and the seaweed was wrapped around my head. Yeah, so basically, it's like I said, you have to think of like one of those underwater documentaries that you watched, where Jonah has actually gone deep into the depths of the sea. And remember, at this time, they did not have access to technology like we have. Right, we have like some great underwater footage, so we actually know what's happening underwater. But at this point, when Jonah was around, or at that point, they did not have the kind of access that we have now. So actually, what he has seen is what he has like written about and prayed about. Yeah, so you see that when he's gone right down, he's got like seaweed also around his head at this point. It says the seaweed was wrapped around my neck. Oh no, around my head. It says yeah. It says water engulfed me up to my neck. The deep ocean surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. And verse 6 again, it says, I went down to the very bottom of the mountains. Now, mountains, who would have believed him when he said there are mountains underground at that point, under the, underwater mountains? Do you think anyone would have believed him at that point? It would have been very, unless you've been there to see it. Yeah, like it would have been like a thing to see and then to believe. If I see it, I'll believe it, kind of a thing. Yeah, but for us, like I said, now we have access to like technology and say underwater kind of footage. So we know that there are, like, we talk about tsunamis and things like that caused by underwater earthquakes, no? That causes like the huge waves and things like that. So we know that it's a reality in our time, meaning it was there even at Jonah's time, but we have access to seeing those things now in terms of say videos.
What does he mean by he's gone down to the bottom of the mountains, Preeti?
So he's literally gone down to the very depths of the sea, Gladys. He's literally drowned, basically. Okay, so he's saying there was water around me, there was seaweed around me. I went down to the very bottom of the mountains. Like he's gone like to the very base. He's seen all that, yeah. Like the deepest part of the sea is like that. He's gone all the way down. Okay. So it's almost not as immediate as we think it is sometimes, because we think that as soon as he went into the water, this fish swallowed him, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, that's how we usually think, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at his prayer, we see that he's actually gone quite a bit down. He's got seaweed around his head. He's gone all the way further down to the very depths like that.
I was wondering how had the seaweeds when he was in the belly of the fish.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So sometimes we think immediately as soon as he fell in that whale came and got him. But when you study the prayer itself in parallel to with what has happened, we see that he's actually gone through the very depths of the sea, like to the bottom. Then possibly the wave has gotten the whale. The great fish. I'll stick to the same great fish that the text talks about. So then possibly the great fish has got him. So he's actually seen before, like he's lost consciousness, and like if you've seen like these movies where some people are like underwater and they're struggling, they see around. It's not like as soon as they get in, they're out like that. So in some bit of there is that last final struggle, you've seen?
Yeah.
To like, get out or things like that. So Jonah seems to have had some bit of it. He's gone, of course, he's gone all the way down. And, he possibly tried to get out and got entangled with seaweed or, things around. Remember, it says there was seaweed around his head. Yeah.
Also, the big fish are generally down, right down.
Yeah, they're right down. Yeah.
Lower the.
Yeah.
Lower
they're
down.
Closer to the
bottom.
What is it called? To the bottom of the sea. Yeah. I was going to say ground level. I was like, no, there must be another word for it.
The ocean floor.
The ocean floor, yeah. They're closer to the ocean floor. Yeah, thanks, Gladys. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, so we see that he's gone through that whole thing. And even after, so this prayer has actually come about after he has been swallowed, and possibly some bit of time has lapsed as well. Because it says, when my life was ebbing away, I called out to the Lord. Like in his final moments, like I said, no, he was already in a comatose state, possibly inside the great fish's belly. From there, he's crying out, and like I said, even at that point, he has not let go of his. He did not let go of his God. He still holds on to that relationship that he has with Yahweh. He knows who his God is. He knows that Yahweh is God of creation and a lot of everything. And then he turns to Yahweh. Remember all the chances he had previously to do this, to call out to the Lord. He could have, remember the many chances we spoke about in chapter 1. He could have called out to God. He could have cried out to his God so many times in chapter 1, but he has not. But here at the end of his life, like the very tail end of his life, where he literally has no breath left, he's possibly in a comatose state. There he calls out to the Lord. He says, I called out to the Lord in verse 7. Yeah, or in another version says, I remembered you, Yahweh. Yeah, and there it says, my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. So this prayer that he's talking about is something that came right at the end. So he's been in the great fish for some time, and then he calls out in verse 7. So that's where that prayer of his his life was ebbing away, like he knew, okay, this is it and this is the end. And then he cries out to Yahweh. But the beautiful thing is, in that point where he felt like he's reached the realm of the dead, or he's at the deepest part of the sea, from there he cries out to Yahweh. And the most amazing thing is that Yahweh has heard his prayer from that point. It says, my prayer came to you, to your holy temple. Yeah, the prayers that Jonah is praying from being right, like they say, he's hit rock bottom. From rock bottom, he's gone to below, down, like down below, like down under in that sense. From there also, when we cry out to the God that we believe in, he will still hear us and he will answer us and sends rescue like he sends Jonah. Yeah, because he says now in verse 8, he says, those who worship worthless idols forfeit the mercy that could be theirs. Yeah, so basically he's talking about people who do not have this kind of a relationship with their God, or basically they don't have true gods that will actually hear their prayer and call out and cry out. When they cry out to them, gods that will answer them. And he says that people who worship idols lose out on the mercy of God. The mercy of God that is available with who? Not with other gods, only with Yahweh. Yeah, so he says, I have not turned to other idols. And one of the things that I highlighted again in the beginning is that even though he knew he was going away from Yahweh and he was literally in the opposite direction, he was willing to die, he still held on to the relationship that he had. Yeah, and that in that he knows that Yahweh is a God, is a true God. And he did not turn, say, given to pagan worship or start offering sacrifices to idols and things like that. Yes, so he says, those who worship worthless idols forfeit the mercy that could be theirs. Mercy that could be theirs. You remember we said Jonah knew the character of God. 4 verse 2, that's one of the key verses in Jonah. Yeah, a God who is, can one of you read Jonah chapter 4 verse 2?
He is in the earth.
Which auntie? Just read Jonah chapter 4 verse 2. I'll play it as well. Verse 2. Yeah. What kind of a God is this God that Jonah is holding on to?
Merciful, slow to anger,
Merciful,
steadfast love, relenting from disaster.
Yeah, so we see that this is coming true now for Jonah. Do we agree? From the depths when Jonah is crying out to his God, like we see in verse 1, this character of God is coming true even for Jonah. Do we see? Gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, maybe not slow to anger at this point because there was a storm and all of that. Yeah, but he was abounding in love and a God who relents from sending calamity. Calamity came, but yet we see that Jonah now was calling out to God and he is sending rescue now. Right? Do we agree?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so this,
literally after the storm, the lull.
yeah. Yeah, but even when he's right at the bottom of it and he's calling out to God, God is not saying, now you deserve, this is what, you're getting what you deserve. Sometimes we say that, no? But we see that Yahweh is not like that. When Jonah turned to Yahweh and he cried out for help in genuine
Possibly
repentance.
because he had been also so well steeped in the teachings of the Jewish, about scriptures. So he held on to that even in a tough time.
Yeah, that he didn't let go. He may have been willing to let go of his job, but he did not let go of his God. Yeah, he let go.
His faith was there.
Yeah, faith was still there. So he's saying also that I do not go after worthless idols because they forfeit the mercy that is there, that is available to them only through Yahweh. So he says, verse 9 now. He says they forfeit the mercy that could be theirs. So this mercy that could have been theirs is the same mercy that is available to Jonah because of the very character of God. Of God who is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in mercy. And we see now in verse 9, it says, but as for me, I promise to offer a sacrifice to you with a public declaration of praise. Okay, now what do you understand of this?
He wants to make amends.
Yes. Yes. And also when he says, I promise to offer a sacrifice to you, where is he going to do this? Where would he have to do this?
Back to the temple.
Yeah. So even in his, literally his life is ebbing away from him, but he's still holding on to the hope that God is going to rescue him at this point. This is where, Gladdy, your theory comes into play. Remember, you were saying in chapter 1 that, he thought God was going to rescue him. This is where it comes into play. That faith of, my God will not let me go. And when I cry out to him, he will deliver me, comes into play here at this point. It may not be there in chapter 1 because he was still willing to die. But we see that at this point, he's crying out and holding on to that very thing, saying, my God will send rescue. And he's actually hopeful in prayer also that he will go physically to, remember we said there was a temple that existed at this time. The Jerusalem temple was the only place to offer sacrifices to Yahweh. So even when he's saying, I will make a public declaration, he is saying that I will physically go to the temple and offer a sacrifice. So he knows, so he's praying in hope, in that anticipation that he's going to come back from this realm of the dead and that he's going to go to the temple in Jerusalem and offer a physical sacrifice. Yeah, so he says, but for me, I promise to offer a sacrifice to you with the declaration of praise. I will surely do what I have promised. And he says, salvation belongs to Yahweh. Yeah, so that's like the message at the end of it, saying at the end of the day, whatever happens, salvation belongs to the Lord. Yeah, and he says, whatever vows I have made, I will make good. Yeah, and verse 10 ends the chapter for us by saying that then the Lord commanded the fish and it vomited Jonah out onto dry land. Again, like Auntie Nimi highlighted before, that creation obeys its creator. Yeah, where the great fish, whenever the Lord told the great fish to vomit Jonah out onto dry land, we see that he doesn't, remember we said he didn't, wherever he was, it wasn't like, the fish threw up in the ocean and then Jonah was stuck somewhere in the middle of the ocean. It wasn't like that. But we see that it actually got him to dry land. So in a way, throughout, you will have to also think of the trajectory of that fish. It would have caught him somewhere in the middle of the sea, but in that also, its direction has been directed by the Lord of this great fish. Because when it was commanded to throw Jonah onto dry land, puts him. So it's closer to land in that sense. It's gone where the Lord
closer
wants him.
to on the way to Nineveh.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
I have a point, Preeti.
Yes, Auntie, go ahead.
In the verse 9, no? At the same time, however, Jonah had begun to envision a broader scope of God, of God's power. He knew God's grace was available to idol worshippers who turned from the idols.
Not available, Auntie.
Sorry, I'm not. Sorry, my thing is on. Okay.
Yeah. No. The
in
grace
verse 9,
is not.
what he says is, he knew God's grace was available to idol worshippers who turned from the idols, and he knew that salvation comes from the Lord. This was the realization he gets after he has that experience in the belly of the fish. Right? He also realizes.
Yeah. And it says that they forfeit, meaning that they don't have it, Auntie. They forfeit the mercy that verse 8, it says, those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. Or another version is that they forfeit the mercy that could have been theirs. They don't have access to the mercy that can be theirs. If they worship idols, they don't have access to the mercy that is available in Yahweh. Yeah. Thank you, Auntie Tarni. So we saw this. Jonah prayed to the Lord his God, and there's a distress call, like an SOS. You know that song, sending out an SOS like that. So Jonah cries to the Lord, and the Lord hears his cry. It's a two-way channel. It's not one-way communication. It's a two-way thing. And we see that Jonah sees God's hand in his current situation. And verse 2-4 is what turns the whole thing around, where it says, yet I will, which points us to the hope that Jonah has. He says, yet I will. And verse 2-5 is the hope that he has in the face of death. And we see that in his going down at this point, right from chapter 1, Jonah was going down. At the end, by the end of chapter 2 now, he's hit like the lowest of lows, has gone all the way down to the mountains as well, at the bottom of the sea, like literally ocean floor, like we said, in his going down. But it was the Lord that brought him up from the pit. That the Lord brought his life up from the pit. And Jonah remembers God in his final moments, and he prays. And those who worship worthless idols lose out on God's love or mercy for them. Yeah, and 2:9 reminds us that Jonah shouts of grateful praise, and he says, I will sacrifice. Like we said again, that points to the hope that he has, that he will physically go back to the temple and offer a sacrifice. And he says, what I have vowed, I will make good, and that salvation is from Yahweh alone, or from the Lord. Yeah. And ironically, the great fish seems to obey the Lord both times, both in the beginning and at the end of both chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2. We see that God of creation is in sovereign control over the storm and even the fish. Yeah, and a question for us to think about was, does God have that kind of control in our lives? The kind of control that he has, or the kind of obedience that we see in creation. Does the Lord see that kind of submission and control to him? And any other takeaways that any of you would like to share, and any questions or comments?
Okay, I just have a doubt, why is this verse 8 over there? It says, those who pay regard to vain idols. It's out of context. It's not the flow of his prayer.
That's a very good question, Deepika. And would any of you like to answer this? Any
I was wondering that. Why suddenly this?
Is he referring to the people of Nineveh?
Both.
Both. That's what I thought. But suddenly for him to, right now he's praying for himself. He's asking for forgiveness or whatever. And he's saying about his own situation. Suddenly he talks about those who pay regard to vain idols, forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice. Why is he comparing at this point?
So it goes back to who he was, no?
Mm-hmm.
He was a prophet, right? He was a prophet. And also in chapter 1, somebody was saying something, sorry.
He is able to realize after that experience in the fish's belly See, now he knew that God's grace was available to idol worshippers also.
No, Auntie, it's the opposite
from the
of
idols.
that.
Who turned from the idols.
To turn from their idols. Okay,
Who
yeah.
turned from that. And he knew that the salvation comes from the Lord. It was an eye-opener realization for him, this experience in the belly of the fish, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why you can see a change in his
So actually,
attitude.
it works like that also, Auntie. And another thing is, he knew that, like in the previous chapter, we saw the sailors were there, no?
Yeah.
The sailors also were pagans, idol worshippers. And the message that he was asked to preach to were also to pagans and idol worshippers.
Yeah.
So he's saying, those people don't have you, God. I have you. Because you remember, it starts off also by saying that he cried out to Yahweh, his God. He's saying, I have not gone after these people. I have not left you. I may have gone away from you and what you asked me to do in terms of my job, like his work. Remember, I said he didn't want to do the work that was given to him. But he's not letting go of the God that he worshipped. Remember, I made a comment earlier saying work and worship for Jonah. In that, Jonah knew that the God that he worships was the true God. So he's saying, I am not like everybody else. I could have, when I didn't want to do my job, I did not let go of you though. You see, it's a very, like a very fine line between what he's doing and what he's actually, it's like an oxymoron. He serves God, but he's trying to run away from God. Yeah. But there were two things that he was not. So while he was running away from what he was called to do in terms of work as a prophet, he was still not letting go of his God, Yahweh, the relationship that he had. So even though he did not want to obey the work that was given to him or fulfill the work that was given to him, he's still saying, I did not let go of you, and start worshipping other gods. Remember, half the trouble Israel had was because they went after other gods.
Yeah.
Even the exile that came was because they went after pagan gods. They started worshipping, incorporating the other gods and idols. But Jonah is saying, I'm not like that. I'm still holding on to you. Because those who worship idols forfeit having a relationship with you and having that access to the mercy and love of God.
Maybe to continue what Deepa and Tarni were saying about the worthless idols, people, initially he knew those people of Nineveh were pagans and idol worshippers. And for that reason, he ran away. He didn't want to preach to them. But now he comes to the realization that those same pagan worshippers and idol worshippers, pagans and idol worshippers, if they turn away and turn towards God, they can be saved. That he didn't want to accept earlier. He didn't want to accept that they could be saved, so he ran off. But now he realizes salvation comes from God even for them if they turn away from their idols.
Yeah, that is,
so
that also points to chapter 3 for us. Yeah, 3 and 4.
It's a realization that has come to Jonah.
But are we sure?
Sorry.
Are we sure he realized? Because at the end of chapter 4, he is still very angry with God for forgiving.
Yes.
That's why I said it's going to come to chapter 4.
Lots to go.
I think the poetry of chapter 2 is very important. Although what Tarni and Gladys are saying about the grace of God being available is there, Jonah is not
very happy
from that perspective. That is our reading and our understanding because we have seen God like that. But for Jonah, see the next thing, he's in the belly of the fish. He's praying that God has to rescue him. God will rescue him. He knows that. But if God rescues him, he also knows he'll have to go to Nineveh and tell them. And he doesn't want to do that. So he's consoling himself. God, those people are going to forfeit your grace. I am going to enjoy your grace.
Yeah.
So much like us.
Yeah. Thanks, Auntie Janet. So like I was just trying to say now, when it comes again in chapter 3 and 4, then we'll run into this, like we had in chapter 1, change in perspective. This will come again later.
And I have one point. In this chapter, he's focusing on himself, It's I. Later, you can see his, in the last
later
chapter.
Also is I
later,
only.
And later we see that, okay? But right now, the focus is on himself. He didn't even know how God is going to use him.
Oh, he knows.
That's the realization.
Or maybe, okay, yeah. But Andy, make sure you don't miss chapter 3 and 4. Because chapter 3 and 4, Jonah is still doing I only.
Done with you earlier, Preeti. Thank you.
Auntie Janet, you want to comment on the I?
I don't know if I'm right. That was what I could
No,
read.
no, but I'm saying, Auntie Janet, are you here?
No.
So I'm saying by the end of chapter 3 and chapter 4,
I know, definitely.
Actually chapter 4, you'll find more of the I than we'd like to accept. Auntie Janet, you're here.
I'm listening, girl.
Tell, you want to answer?
No, and the strange thing, Preeti, he goes to Nineveh, preaches, he does everything. But then he sits outside the gates to watch what God is going to do.
Exactly. That
he
is
going
the
to save them or
I.
not?
That is where the I comes into play.
So was his preaching to the people genuine? Or he was afraid God would punish him if he doesn't do it? So he reluctantly went and preached to them.
So we see it's a, I don't know if I should answer all of it, but maybe I'll answer it in part now. So we see that Jonah still does, like now in chapter 3, when we move next week into chapter 3, we see new Jonah, second chance Jonah. Okay, he does everything that he's supposed to do. But you will go back and question like you are doing now. Was he doing this wholeheartedly?
Yes,
Was this actually what he wanted? Because he's in chapter 4, he's having full out war with the Lord.
Yeah.
You see him, Jonah, who is in the bottom of the sea, saying, I cried out to the Lord in my distress and he heard me. Same Jonah is back to fighting with the Lord, saying, you destroy them.
Okay. We'll wait.
We'll wait. Let me die. One point he says, let me die.
Not one point. There are many points where he says, I have had it. And he doesn't. See, he doesn't, of course, even then he's being like a good prophet. He doesn't take his life. He's saying, you take my life. He doesn't want to take responsibility for it. So Jonah is very interesting. He gets more and more complex.
Also, for all that he's saying about, I will pay the sacrifice and offer the voice of thanksgiving, that is one side of it. But he's not willing to do what God wants him to do, which is, as you said, typical of all of us.
Yes.
You pray, you speak, you mouth platitudes, but you don't follow them.
In that situation, we will beg and cry and plead and get on our knees. Everything we'll do possible.
Yeah.
But once we get it, and then you'll forget the intensity of the prayer also, I think. Like how desperate we would have been.
Prophet full of contradictions, no, Jonah?
But you know, the reality is that all of us are little Jonahs.
Yes.
Yes, Rita was about to say that. Want to do the right thing, but we fail. We go again. We want to come back.
Because all of us at some point backslide. No, whatever our cause is, all of us are mini Jonahs like that. And you say, oh, he was a prophet. How could he do such a thing? When we see our leaders fail, it's the same thing. Or like when we all fail also. Forget leaders. All of us trip up. No. Because it's deliberate going against what we know as right. So like that, all of us, like we say, shoot ourselves in the foot.
We take God for granted also.
Yeah.
Comes to that actually.
And actually Nineveh, chapter 3 is very interesting in terms of how Nineveh repents and what they do. And sometimes I think we have to learn from the pagan nation of Nineveh in terms of how they turn to God like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes Gladys said.
It's really amazing, Preeti.
Yeah, go ahead, Gladys. You were saying something?
Oh, I'm saying amazing that God was concerned about this pagan nation. So it was not just Israel that God was concerned about. Because also this pagan nation also happened to be mortal enemies of Israel.
Yeah. See, Jonah is one that works for Nineveh, but there are other books in the Old Testament that work as a prophecy against Nineveh, because Nineveh also, of course, trips up in some time. Yeah, but again, we see Jonah, like Nineveh seems to be a good example of genuine repentance, and then you're wondering what Jonah is doing in this.
Correct.
Because he's sitting under his plant saying, I'm waiting.
So you actually left wondering who appropriated the available grace of God.
Correct. Yeah, so we have lots to talk about in the weeks ahead. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I'll stop
Thank you,
recording for now.
Preeti.
Thank you, Preeti.
Thank you.